Everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Wendy Liu from the University of Toronto, Canada. Thank you for joining us today for the fourth annual virtual conference celebrating the International Day of Women's Statistics and Data Science. This year's theme is Thriving in Your Environment. We are recording this event, and the videos will be available on the CWS YouTube channel. We kindly ask you to post your questions to the speakers using the Q&A or the chat option. Without further ado, I'm delighted to start our session, S408, Practicing Methods for Real-World Research, Balancing Rigor and Simplicity. This session features two speakers from Canada, Rose and Vicky. They will share their experiences conducting research using real-world data. Okay, right. So Rose, are you ready to?
I'll
No?
share my
Yep.
screen.
Great.
Perfect.
And Rose is currently a statistician at AstraZeneca.
Perfect. Can you see my screen for
Yes,
the slide?
looks great. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for the introduction, Dr. Lu, and I'll just start with my presentation. So my name is Rose, and I just graduated from the Master of Science program in Biostats at the University of Toronto, and I'm currently employed at AstraZeneca. So today I'll be presenting my thesis work during master study on the topic of comparisons of propensity score methods for assessing racial disparities in multiple myeloma health outcomes. So a bit of a background about my research. Multiple myeloma is a type of blood cancer that grows in humans' plasma cells in the bone marrow, and it is a rare cancer that represents about 1.8% of new cancer cases in the United States. And although there has been improvement in the multiple myeloma health outcomes, there were still racial disparities that have been observed. Especially for the African American patients, there have been studies reported both superior and inferior survival outcomes compared to white patients. So that leads to the challenges that I aim to solve in the study, where the first challenge was that there has been limited real-world studies on multiple myeloma health outcomes across multiple race ethnicity groups. And my first objective in the study was to evaluate racial disparities in overall survival and time to next treatment among multiple myeloma patients. And then through literature review, I've also found that there has been inadequate adjustment for covariate confounding. So that leads to the second objective of the thesis work, was to compare the performance of 7 propensity score methods in adjusting for confounding across race ethnicity groups. And now I'll move on to the methods part. So a little bit background of the study cohort, which was extracted from the Flatiron Health data. So this data set was an electronic health records derived longitudinal database that's collecting comprehensive patient information across the entire United States. And specifically for my analytic cohort, there were around 12,000 adult multiple myeloma patients who are diagnosed between 2011 and 2024, and all of whom who received the first-line treatment within 60 days of their multiple myeloma diagnosis. And as for the covariates, as for the variables of interest, the main exposure in the study was race ethnicity. So according to how Flatiron categorized it, there were 5 categories. And as you can see here, white patients were the majority, accounting for about 6,000 patients. And of course, this is real world data, so missingness occur in this variable. So to handle this 22% of unknown or missing data, I imputed the data sets using multiple imputation by chain equations, where 22 imputed data sets were generated. And moving on to the core areas of interest, there were they composed of demographics, clinical information, and biomarkers, and all of them are listed here, which were either binary or categorical. And last but not least, there were outcomes of interest. So in this study, I included two of them, where the first one was overall survival, defined as the time from patient's multiple myeloma diagnosis date to the death date. And if the patient did not die, then it will be censored at last known life date. And the second outcome of interest was time to next treatment. So this one was defined as the patient's time from first line treatment start date to either their start date of second line treatment or death, depending on which event would occur first. And if neither event occurred, then the patient will be censored at last known life date. And now this is the most interesting part of the study, which is looking at the propensity score methods. So there were 7 propensity score methods used, which were split into different categories of PS propensity score matching and propensity score weighting. So for propensity score matching, first of all, propensity score was defined as the probability of patients belonging to a certain race ethnicity group. For example, if there were Asian, then what's the probability of them belonging to an Asian versus being a white patient? And for propensity score matching, there were nearest neighbor matching with or without caliper distance, as well as optimal matching. And for propensity score weighting, I used the stabilized inverse probability of treatment weighting and inverse probability treatment weighting with 5% trimming. And there were also 2 other propensity score methods, which are stratification method and using propensity score as an additional covariate in the outcome model. And before and after applying the propensity score method, it is crucial to check the covariate balance. And the metric that I used was standardized mean difference, which was calculated using the multivariate Myeloma distance method. So this method guaranteed that I can capture imbalance in the distributions while also accounting for correlation structure among categories. And if the covariate is having a standardized mean difference below 0.1, then that indicates the covariate is achieving sufficient balance. So the overall workflow of estimating recession effect starts with estimating the standardized mean differences for all covariates, and then moving on to using the Cox proportional hazard models to estimate the recession effect on overall survival and time to next treatment, respectively. And lastly, I will calculate the final estimate by pulling across the 22 imputed datasets using Rubin's rules. And now I would like to show you some of the results that I derived. So here, this is a plot that's showing the standardized mean differences of different covariates. And this plot is also called love plot. So here's an example of Asian versus white, where the right straight line you see in here is the threshold of 0.1 of standardized mean difference, and the right dotted line is showing the standardized mean differences in the original data. And after applying the 7 propensity score methods, as you can see, most of the lines fall below or around 0.1, indicating sufficient covariate balance. However, the propensity score stratification and optimal matching were leading to less optimal results because there were increase in the standardized mean differences, and that's indicating potential covariate imbalance. And as for the overall survival results, I used this forest plot to better visualize. And you can see here, the hazard ratios were around 0.6, with the 95% confidence interval did not cross 1. So this indicates that there were statistically significant results of Asian patients having superior overall survival compared to white patients. And now I would like to discuss the results that are derived. So due to the time constraint, I wasn't able to show you all the results, but I'm happy to share them upon request. So here I summarized a table of the propensity score method performances, listing the strengths and limitations. So from my study, I noticed that nearest neighbor matching with and without caliper distance showed strong covariate balance, but they were at a cost of losing sample sizes, which was not ideal. And similar for optimal matching, even though it can retain more samples, there were still residual imbalance that were observed in certain covariates. And I have highlighted the stabilized inverse probability treatment weighting here because it is showing a more optimal performance and that can be applicable or increasing the generalizability of the study because it shows strong covariate balance after the application of it and also retaining the full sample size. And unlike inverse probability with treatment weighting with streaming, this one is leading to less generalizability because it can also exclude some underrepresented groups so that there will be large standardization differences observed. And for propensity score stratification, it is good at retaining more observations, but sometimes if there are not enough samples in a certain strata, then there might not be as precise results as possible in the survival models. And last but not least, using propensity score as an additional covariate was easy to be implemented, but I would suggest using it more as a benchmark method in propensity score analysis. And for the study itself, there were like certain limitations. First of all, treatments were not included due to the complex nature of the electronic health records data because they were not consistently recorded. So that might affect the results because they were important time varying covariates that can be included. And the second limitation was that there can be potential immortal time bias from the inclusion criteria because patients had to live long enough to receive the first line treatment. And as for some future research ideas, I would suggest future researchers to select propensity score methods aligning well with their specific study goals, whether that is to maintain good covariate balance or to retain more sample sizes. And then it might also be worthwhile incorporating time varying covariates such as biomarkers or treatment variables. And if there are racial disparities observed, I think it is also a good idea to explore or investigate the biological contributors to those racial disparities. And lastly, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to my supervisors, Melanie Pauline-Costello and Professor Jenna Six, for their invaluable guidance and support. And I also thank Yanling Jing for her thoughtful feedback throughout this work. And I would like to acknowledge that this research was supported by the Dalla Lana School of Public Health at University of Toronto and Roche with access to Flatiron Health data. And I gratefully acknowledge the patients whose data made this research possible. And here are some references. Thank you for listening, and that's my email here. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Rose. Right on time. Let's save questions till the end if we have time. Vicky, are you able to share slides?
Yes.
Vicky is now currently a statistician at Unity Health Toronto, and she is ready to go. Wonderful. Okay,
You
over
can
to you.
see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Lu, for your introduction. I'm Vicky, and I'm research data analyst at Interventional Psychiatry Program. So today I'll be talking about less is more simple methods for impactful clinical analysis. So when I was a student, I learned many statistical methods, including advanced ones, but we rarely applied them to real data, so it felt overwhelming. Oh, okay. And I wasn't confident I could ever use them in practice. But once I started working in research, I realized that most of the time, we don't actually need advanced methods. Simple approaches like regression modeling can already answer many important research questions. For example, in R, I just type GLM function, add the variables, press run, and it's done. But in practice, most of the effort happens before modeling, like defining exposures and outcomes clearly, cleaning messy data, and checking assumptions. Here are the 3 steps I'll use today. First, clear definitions, defining the research questions and key variables so everyone on the team has the same understanding. Second, careful data preparation. This includes checking data quality, organizing information, running descriptive analysis, and making sure the dataset is truly ready for modeling. These 2 steps form the foundation. Once they are solid and assumptions are met, a simple, transparent model is usually the most effective. Third, simple modeling. This is where the KISS principle applies. The KISS principle is a design idea that encourages straightforward solution over unnecessary complexity. It has been phrased in many ways, like keep it super simple, keep it short and simple, or keep it simple and straightforward. I'll show you how this works in practice with 2 examples next. First, I'll use Enhance as an example. Enhance is a nationally representative U.S. survey that combines interviews, physical exams, and lab tests. Since it's freely available, it's a great dataset for practicing real-world analysis. The picture on the right shows the 5 main domains you can access: demographic, dietary, examination, laboratory, or questionnaire data. Together, they cover a wide range of health, nutrition, and lifestyle information. And here is the link to the official analytic guidelines if you want to explore further. Now, let's look at how we actually apply Enhance in a project. Here are the key steps we follow when turning a research question into an analysis. Step 1, and I think this is the most important part, is clearly defining the research questions and key variables. This step is a collaborative process between clinicians and statisticians. Clinicians bring the clinical perspective, they understand what's meaningful in practice, while statisticians help translate those ideas into measurable variables. For example, in one of our projects, we asked whether the association between restricted diets and depressive symptoms differs across BMI groups. The question sounds clear, but then comes to the tricky part. What exactly is a restricted diet? When we searched for a diet in Enhanced Variable Portal, we found more than 800 results across multiple questionnaires. So we had to sit down with clinicians and clarify which questions should we use from which cycles. So as you can see here, enhanced data are collected in many different cycles. So we also needed to decide which cycles were relevant for our question and whether the same variables existed consistently across them. And the same challenge came up for depressive symptoms. Before 2005, Enhance used a long list of individual questions about depression, as you can see here. Each question looked a little different. We need to discuss with clinicians whether to use all of the questions, and if so, how to define and how to use them, or to identify which specific questions they are most interested in and which best align with our study goals. After 2005, we had the option of using the standardized PHQ-9 scale, which can be defined as the sum of 9 individual questions shown here. It's a validated and widely used clinical measure of depression, which made our definition much clearer and more consistent. However, we still needed to decide whether to combine multiple survey cycles or analyze only the cycles in which PHQ-9 questions were available. These kinds of decisions, along with defining inclusion and exclusion criteria, all feed into the data cleaning step. Once these parameters are set, we can narrow down the possible analytic methods. In this case, a regression model could be one of the options because our goal was to examine the association between restricted diets and depressive symptoms, while also accounting for key covariates. Once the team agreed on variables and completed data cleaning, we moved to step 2, data validation and diagnostic. This step is led by the statistician, and it's about double-checking data accuracy and exploring data patterns before modeling. I usually start with the table 1, the demographic characteristics table. This helps me double-check my cleaning. For example, if I see a lot of missing data in one variable, like the NAs you see here, I'll go back to the Enhanced dictionary to check if that's expected. Enhanced documentation often lists the number of missing cases, so this step helps confirm data accuracy. After that, I'll look at the distribution of main variables. Here on the left, you can see the raw distribution of urinary nicotine measured in nanograms per milliliter. It's very skewed. Most values are very low, with a few much higher ones. When a variable looks like this, it's hard to find data problems from the histogram. On the right, after log transformation patterns become clear, notice that spike on the far left. That's the lower limit of detection. In ENHANCE, when lab values fall below a certain threshold, they can't be measured precisely, so they are recorded as that threshold number. You might not notice this problem in a raw histogram, but after log transformation, it stands out. Once we detect it, we have to decide how to handle those values, like exclude them, impute them, or apply another approach. Another part of step 2 is checking model assumptions. For example, if we plan to use regression, we might check whether variables are normally distributed, whether residuals look reasonable, or whether there's collinearity between predictors, among other assumptions, depending on the specific model. If any of these assumptions don't hold, we may need to consider alternative methods. For simple methods, this step is quite manageable because their assumptions are well established, so it's easy to find guidelines and verify them. Here's the last step, choosing the most appropriate methods and running the model. For survey data like ENHANCE, we use survey-weighted regression to represent the US population. The survey package in R makes this easy. You can see here, we first define the survey design using variables for cluster, strata, and weights, and then fit the regression model. ENHANCE even provides sample code for this, which makes implementation quick and reproducible. Okay, after working with ENHANCE, I want to share another type of analysis we often do. Sometimes instead of one large data set, we have many smaller studies that all explore a similar question. That's where meta-analysis comes in. It's essentially a type of systematic review that combines results from multiple independent studies into one overall estimate. Here are the key steps. Step 1 is to define the research question. For example, in one of our projects, we look at whether people with delayed sleep-wake phase disorder, or DSWPD, had higher depression severity compared to people without it. Because the outcome here is continuous depression severity scores such as PHQ-9 or BDI, we immediately know this is two-group comparisons. And step 2 is to set inclusion and exclusion criteria and screen the studies. So this part is usually led by clinicians. And step 3 is to extract the statistical values and format the data into a clean table. So at the bottom of the slides, you can see that what the table looks like. Like we have the study, scale use, sample size, mean, and standard deviation for each group. For continuous two-arm studies, this is exactly the format we need. But if it were a one-arm or binary outcome study, the table would look a bit different. Finally, step 4 is to run the model. Once the data are organized, this becomes the easiest step. In R, we can use function like metacount to combine the studies and generate a forest plot, summarizing each study's effect size and pull results. If you are new to meta-analysis, I highly recommend this resource, Doing Meta-Analysis in R. It walks through each step with clear examples. Once you understand the structure, you can reuse the same workflow across topics and datasets. Okay, why less is more? Here's the reason. Simple methods, when done carefully, can answer many clinical questions. Their real benefits are that they are easier for clinicians to understand, more transparent and reproducible, and they build greater confidence because we fully understand how the results were produced. This doesn't mean advanced methods are useless. They are powerful and sometimes essential when the questions are complex or when simple methods are not enough. But they should be used thoughtfully because advanced methods require stricter assumptions, more time, and are understood by fewer people, which makes it harder to ensure they are applied and interpreted correctly. Now, here's my advice for new graduates. Start simple. Once you build confidence with simple methods, you will have a strong foundation for complex ones. Along the way, you'll also learn their strengths and limitations, which makes it easier to recognize when a simple method is enough and when an advanced method is truly needed. Okay, I'd like to thank Dr. Wendy Liu, Dr. Venkabhat, and everyone in the Interventional Psychiatry program for their support. Thank you all for being here and sharing your time today. Here are the key references and resources I mentioned throughout today's talk. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Vicky. I really like that last slide. Okay, so we have time for questions. Rose, maybe you can turn on your camera and we could probably take 1 or 2 quick questions. Maybe I can start one. I'm going to ask Vicky. did you have any experiences when you presented a simple result and then others actually really ask you to try various of very advanced methods? And how did you convince others what would be the best way to present the results?
I think the first thing I will talk to like clinicians, what questions you really want, and I will tell them like, okay, this method it already answered the questions, then we probably like it's not necessary to take more time to explore the advanced methods. So and then after I implement those and also show some examples of these two type of methods could get the very close results, and then they agree with me.
It's good. I think it's sometimes if it's feasible, you just present both, and
Yeah.
then and I think that sometimes just for completeness, others would have the option to comment on what is necessary. Yeah. Anyone else? Maybe I'll ask Rose a question. I know race is a very difficult, sometimes defined, and then you had a definition in some way defined as exclusively from the categories. I know one definition that sometimes needed to really be incorporated into is a mixed race. And so did you actually run into something that you have to really make a decision like Asian versus, I think you have the love plot, right, with white. And what if it's a mixed? I think that is common in some of the countries. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was indeed like a question that I faced when there were like certain categories that were like having really small sample sizes, and due to the patient confidentiality reasons, they were not able to release those or they did not suggest to put into like separate categories. And the way to deal with this challenge was to just simply having like an other race category that both accounts for like those small race ethnicity groups as well as those people who have multiple race, like who self-identify having multiple race ethnicity categories. But when interpreting this group, we should be more cautious in terms of if there are disparities observed, and maybe we'll need to look into like what's the like the proportion of each small resistance group in this entire group. I think it just comes to interpretation part that need to be more careful.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. So I'd like to thank Rose and Vicky for two wonderful, insightful presentations. And I also like to thank the audience for joining us. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation as much as I have. And with that, I'd like to close the session. Okay, and I encourage all of you to continue exploring the remaining session of the conference. Hope to see you again in another session. Goodbye. Thank you.